This is going to be the beginning of a series of video on nutrition and the digestive system. So in this part, we're really going to be focusing on food. So what are our macronutrients that we have in our food? What are the micronutrients that we have in our food? The calories attributed to our macronutrients, and the recommended caloric doses that we have in those foods. In the other series of videos that we will have based on the digestive system and nutrition, we'll talk about looking at food labels, how to analyze a food label. We'll talk about how to figure out what are key macronutrients in our 4 food groups, and then we're going to be really looking into the digestive system, how the digestive system works, what are the key organs and the enzymes in the digestive system, and the pathway that food goes once it enters the body and once it exits the body. So our key focus in this video is going to be topic 1, what is metabolism, topic 2, the energy and chemical changes, topic 3, nutrients, and we'll actually talk a little bit about topic 4. So all of these things are going to be in video number 1. Video number 2 is just going to be on the food groups. So what are our 4 food groups? What are the main micro and macronutrients in those food groups, and some other interesting tidbits. Our third video is going to be focusing on food labels, so how to read a food label and how to analyze a food label. That's going to be our third video. And then our last video in our series of videos is going to be focusing on just the digestive system. So how do we get from mouth to where food comes out of your body? Okay, so metabolism. When we're talking about metabolism, we're talking about any chemical reaction that takes place in our cells in our body. And the key reason why we have to have metabolism is because we convert food that you consume into energy for the body to function. Now, our key energy packet that our body uses is something called ATP. And what we really need to do is that your body has to convert all of the food that comes into your body into this energy packet of ATP, and that's basically like the gasoline that your body uses. So just like a car uses gasoline to run, your body cells uses ATP to run. And all of the chemical reactions that take the food that enters your body and changes it into ATP is metabolism. So why we have metabolism? Well, your first thing is the body needs to take in the food, rip it into small bits. So that happens mouth and stomach. Not only do we have to take the food and rip it into smaller pieces, but we have to chemically break down that food. So we have to take the small pieces and break it down into those basic molecules that your body can process. Then we need to transport those basic molecules from the small intestine, where they get absorbed, to all of your cells in your body. And the system that does that is your bloodstream, so our cardiovascular system. Our cardiovascular system is basically the key transportation system hub in your body. Not only does it transport oxygen and carbon dioxide, but it transports a whole bunch of dissolved substances in the bloodstream. One of those being all of the broken down basic molecules from metabolism. And then once all of those components get to your cells, it gets converted into energy. And this happens in the organelle in your cell called the mitochondria. So if we're looking at energy and chemical changes, well, energy is the ability to do work. And there are so many different forms of energy. Light energy, kinetic energy, potential energy, sound energy, wind energy, elastic energy. All of those are different forms of energy, but your body primarily works on chemical energy, where we break down molecules into different molecules, and during that breakdown, we release energy primarily in the form of heat. And the key thing about energy is it can change forms, which is based on this concept of the law of conservation of energy, which is basically saying that energy can't be created and it's not destroyed. All the energy that we have in the universe from the dawn of time till now is the same amount of energy we've had. It's just been changing from different forms. Now, this image is basically showing some of the different potential changes of energy forms. So we have our cute little cannon and the explosion of our bullet here. So we have chemical energy, so our gunpowder is exploding, and that's producing a chemical reaction because I'm producing carbon dioxide, I'm producing water vapor, I'm producing also heat. That's allowing my bullet to travel. And anytime I have things in motion, that's kinetic energy. And as I'm traveling up and up and up, I'm also generating potential energy because the higher I go, the more potential I have to travel. Then my bullet gets to its top part of its parabolic path, so its curvy path. And then it's going down, down, and then we have kaboom. I have kinetic energy and I have heat. So this is one of multiple different examples of how energy changes forms. Another example is your cell phone, right? Our cell phones are powered by batteries. Batteries is basically a chemical reaction where I take certain chemicals, put them together, and the chemical reaction that's happening in the batteries is producing electrons. So I'm changing from chemical energy to electrical energy. And then all of those electrons travel in the circuitry of my cell phone. And that electrical energy changes into sound because I can hear noises from my cell phone. Radiant because it's producing light, and a whole bunch of other things. So in our body, and this is specifically for our body, the key changes that we have is that the chemical energy that is found in the food that we eat is transformed into, number one, thermal energy, because your body has a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. That is basically the key temperature that your body is. Higher than that, you are basically running a fever. Lower than that, you are in hypothermia. And mechanical energy, because your body is in constant motion due to muscle movement. So whether it's voluntary, so like right now I'm moving my hands, I'm moving my neck, I'm moving my mouth, or involuntary. I don't have to think about my heart beating, it's beating. I don't have to think about my diaphragm contracting and relaxing and my intercostal muscles contracting and relaxing. I'm breathing. So that is just one key example of the chemical changes that are happening in your body. And for those chemical changes to happen, we need energy in the form of the food that we eat. So a chemical change, by definition, is the bonds between our atoms change, forming new molecules. And every single time I have a change in the molecules that are forming, it releases energy in the form of heat. Nutrients. Now, nutrients are basically any substance that is found in food that your body needs for a particular need. We have two categories of nutrients. We have macro, which you need in large quantities. And then you have micro, and our key macronutrients, proteins, carbs, and fats. Micronutrients you need in small quantities. The word micro means small. The word macro means large. So a lot of the time in science, the words tell you clues to what the term means. So macronutrients, macro meaning large, are nutrients that you need in large amounts. Micronutrients, micro meaning small, are nutrients that you need in small amounts. So for macronutrients, as we basically said, it's our proteins, our carbs, and our fats. For micronutrients, it's vitamins and minerals. Now, key distinction that I want to make between our macronutrients and our micronutrients. Our macronutrients, these things will basically produce a certain amount of energy in our body. So when you consume proteins, carbs, and fats, they are really key for energy production. While for micronutrients, you don't need them your body doesn't use them for energy. Your body really uses micronutrients for molecules in chemical reactions, for molecules in enzymes, for molecules to help the immune system and a whole bunch of other systems work properly. So these are not used to burn energy. These are used for all of the chemical reactions in your body to work properly. Our key macronutrients, first and foremost, are carbohydrates, and they are the main source of energy that your body uses. So if in between carbs, proteins, and fats, your bodies are going to use carbs the most. And we actually have 3 types of carbohydrates, and the types of carbohydrates have to do with the complexity of the carbohydrate molecule. So our first type is actually our least complex, which is monosaccharides. Mono is our prefix for 1. So a monosaccharide is a single sugar molecule. And examples of this are glucose and fructose. So this is an example of glucose, and actually all chemical reactions in your body will take any type of carbohydrates and break it down till it's in glucose form, because your body cannot process, well, your body, once it's in the small intestine, doesn't use your complete carbohydrate. It needs to be broken down into the most simplest structure for the carbohydrates, and the most simplest structure for the carbohydrates is glucose. And it's this form of glucose that goes through the small intestine and goes into the bloodstream. Now, our second type of carbohydrate is something called a disaccharide. Now, the prefix di means 2. So a disaccharide is a double sugar molecule, which is lactose and sucrose. Those are examples of carbohydrates. So sucrose is actually more commonly known as table salt, table sugar. So whenever you are sweetening coffee or sweetening tea or adding any type of sweetener, the sugar that you have is going to be sucrose. And if we can look at our picture here, it's basically our 2 sugar molecules that are chemically bonded to each other. And our third category, and this is our most complex form of carbohydrate, is our polysaccharide. And poly means more than 1, so it's a complex sugar. And the key complex sugar is starch. So starch is actually the carbohydrate that requires the most amount of digestion. And this is actually the carbohydrate where digestion starts immediately when you eat it in the mouth. So out of the 3 macronutrients, starch, the form of starch, is actually started to digest in the mouth. Now, our next category of macronutrients are proteins. Now, proteins can be used as a source of energy, but it's not the key thing that your body uses it as. It actually uses protein really for building and repairing cells and tissues, because most of your cells and tissues, particularly muscle tissue, is the main building block is protein. So whenever you consume protein, your body will be using that to help build and repair those things. And then if it still needs an energy source because it doesn't have enough from the carbohydrates that you consume, it doesn't have enough from the fat, it will be using protein. So it's basically keeping the last resort energy source, because your body uses protein as your building block. It would rather take any other energy source before protein. And protein is basically shown as a chain of amino acids. So if we're looking at just a particular protein molecule here, your body basically breaks up all of these little round circles and individually uses these amino acids as building blocks for other things. A good analogy would be like Lego pieces, right? So our proteins are just basically a big Lego structure, and then when it goes into your body is basically pulling apart all of those individual Lego pieces, so you have all of these individual pieces. Our last macronutrient are lipids, which are also commonly known as fats. So they store and provide energy. So a lot of the time, if your body has too many macronutrients that it doesn't need, either it will get rid of it or it will store it. And it tends to store it in the form of lipids. And it's also actually really important as a form of insulation from the cold and protects organs. So all of your internal organs are actually covered in a layer of fat to act as a cushioning and to also act as insulation from the cold, because your body needs to keep a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius all the time. So it uses that lipid layer to make sure that your body temperature stays constant by insulating that from the cold. And another thing is that lipids are extremely important in the production of particular hormones and the cell membranes of all of your cells, because all of our cells have a lipid bilayer that surrounds the outside of our cells. Vitamins and minerals, really important, but they do not provide your body any energy. Vitamins and minerals are extremely vital in all your chemical reactions that happen in the body. Super important for tissue maintenance and body responses. So if we're just looking at certain minerals like calcium and phosphorus, important in building bones and in building teeth. Sodium, you really need this for nerve impulses to be sent. And basically your entire nervous system, your nerve impulses require sodium, require potassium, require a lot of minerals, but you don't need a large amount of them. Potassium, vital in making sure that your heart beats properly and muscle contractions happen properly. So a lot of your minerals are very important, but just like all of your other nutrients, if you have too much of it, your body doesn't use it, it gets rid of it. Calories and caloric intake. So a calorie is basically a unit of heat energy in the body, and we basically determine, there's two ways to figure out the unit of energy for your body. There's the joule and the calorie. The calorie is really defined, specified for food, so that's what we use. And our caloric intake is based on the amount of calories that you need per day to function. Now, the caloric intake is not constant. It's not the same for everyone, and it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on age, depends on gender, it depends on your physical activity, and it also depends on your metabolic rate. So your metabolic rate is how fast you process food. So if I'm comparing two people who are the same age, the same gender, but one is, a pro swimmer, and the other one is a student, well, the pro swimmer is going to have a higher caloric intake because the pro swimmer is much more physically active. So your caloric intake does vary from person to person. Now, we're looking right here. This is the average caloric intake for men, and you can see that depending on their activity level and depending on the age, it changes drastically. But our key, level where you need the highest amount of calories is in the late teens to early young adult age, whether it's sedentary, low active, or high active. And this is the same trend that we see for females, that the key area where you need the highest amount of caloric intake is in your teenage years and your young adult years. Now, depending on what nutrient you have, you can either have 4 calories per gram is how much food that you can, how much energy is in 1 gram of food, and this is for carbohydrates and proteins. And then for fats, it is 9 calories per gram. But we need to remember that your body prefers carbohydrates as its main source of energy. So whenever you have you're consuming food, your body is basically going to be burning the carbohydrates first, then it's going to be burning the fats, and then the last one it would be burning would be your proteins. Micronutrients, again, important for body functions, important for biochemical reactions, not important for energy. So vitamins and minerals will not give any energy value. So if I'm looking at an example of food, so here we have pasta bolognese, and we're looking at how many calories we would get in this amount of food. So the key thing that we need to remember, again, that our carbohydrates and our protein have 4 calories per gram, and our fat gives us 9 calories per gram. So that means to figure out our total caloric intake here, I would have to take the number of carbohydrates, so 75 grams of carbohydrates, times this by 4 calories. I get 300 calories just from the carbohydrates. Then if I'm looking at the protein, would be 20 grams times 4 calories, gives me my 80 calories there. And then if I'm looking at the fat, I would be taking my 8 grams times 9 calories, and my total caloric intake would be the sum of 300 plus 80 plus 72, which is 452 calories. Now we're going to do one more example, and this is of chicken broth. So the same thing, carbs and proteins have 4 calories per gram, whereas fat only has 9 calories per gram. So I would be taking 0.9 grams times 4 to give me 3.6 calories for my carbs. I'd be taking 1.4 grams times 4 for the amount of calories for my protein, which would be 5.6 calories. And then for the fat, I would be taking 1.3 times 9, which would be 11.7. I add those up together, and my total caloric intake from chicken broth would be 20.9 calories. Hope this was helpful. Please continue on in our series of videos on the digestive system to learn more about our other topics. Thanks for watching.